ref. Actually got the ball. Good evening, Tottenham fans all across the world, and welcome back to the Irish Hotspur with your boys Dave and Jack, Johnny and Sam. And it's that time of the week again where we're here to sit here, talk about Tottenham and share our views and our opinions on what's going on and the latest around the football club. Now, we're not going to waste too many people's time this evening. We are going to more or less get straight into it and crack on. Plenty to talk about the Jed Spence interview. We'll also talk about the rumours around Romero and the interest from Atletico Madrid, and also his comments on the medical department, as well as Jan Vertonghen retiring as well. What is your favourite moment of his? So plenty of good things to talk about tonight as we go through this. All we ask of you guys is to share your opinions, put them in the chat, and we'll bring as many of them up as we can as we go along. Any members, there is a post up in the community section for you guys to get your questions in that we will answer at the end of the show. But look, thank you everybody for tuning in. Let's get into it, Jacko.
Let's get into it just quickly, though. Thanks to Kaylee Davis. She upgraded, it looks like, the membership to an elite membership. So thank you, Kaylee. Very, very generous of you. And I hope to link up with you sometime soon for that coffee over at Anchorhead. Like I said, since I've been going there, getting a lot of compliments from the hipsters in Seattle for going to that coffee place. So thanks to Kaylee, and also plenty of other beautiful names in the house that are members as well of the channel. Really do appreciate you guys. But let's get into it, like Dave was saying. And we're going to start, of course, with that Jed Spence interview with the likes of Rio Ferdinand. And I think what we're going to get started off with is kind of maybe just, were you glad, maybe happy that Jed Spence had done the interview in the first place? Do you think it was the right thing to do to put so much of this stuff out into the open? Right? He cleared the air on plenty of maybe the dirty laundry that was with Antonio Conte, also his struggles, just in general as a footballer. Felt like, times have been unfair to him. So maybe I'll go to Johnny and Sam on this one. And Dave and I as well, by the way, have a video coming out tomorrow on this, so you can get our deeper and kind of longer thoughts on this. But going to you first on this, Johnny, I mean, the fact that he even did the interview, do you think that's a good decision, not a good decision? What do you make of the fact that Jed Spence has done this in the first place?
Oh, I think you're on mute, Johnny.
No, I'm not on mute. I just didn't speak.
Speak, I'm in trouble.
Doing my Jed being thoughtful while he came out. But listen, look, I think there needed to be some clarity in a lot of what's been said on his behalf, what's been said about him. And I think it's given fans some insight, the ones that gave him a lot of stick. When I was, for example, sticking up for Jed, I'll take these off. The joke's over now. When I was sticking up for Jed at the beginning of the season, all I kept getting back was, yeah, but he's a bad egg. There's a reason why Ange isn't playing him. He's no good. He's this, that, and the other. And I think there was a lot of empathy for Jed. Obviously, the fan base were right behind him based on his football, but adding the sort of detail of what was going on with Conte and the other managers. Look, there's no two ways about it. He made mistakes at a young age. He screwed up. He didn't do well at Middlesbrough and Leeds, and he made various mistakes. But didn't we all, when we were 20, 21, 22? Yeah. Didn't we all think we were the best guy in the park, the smartest guy? When do you ever listen to anyone? And, it's obvious that going out to Genoa and realizing, look, this is it. This is make or break for your career. Going out there and turning it around. Interestingly enough, although he was sent out there as a right back, almost straight away they were playing him at left back, which is why this transition, and you've seen such a amazing turnaround with him as a left-sided player, because his games at Forest were on the right side. And I think you'll find he's had so many games on the left-hand side now. For him to transition to the right, it's not how you think. You can't just switch him to the right and expect him to be the same player. He's had to learn how to adapt. And I think it would still take him 4 or 5, 6 games playing back on that right-hand side to get into the flow of of his old game, because he's had to transition his game. But I think from a point of view, for a PR point of view, it was good. There was a few insights. I myself was a bit surprised with the Ryan Sessegnon players liking his post after he just beat us. Hello, I thought that was poor. And there was just a few things in that interview with him which sort of opened our eyes. I think some of them didn't need to be said, maybe, and others. Well, the leadership thing. It came across that there isn't any real sort of leaders in the pack. Again, very strange. I mean, normally at very successful clubs, obviously we're not a very successful club, but at a successful club, there is a character who is the leading light, whether it's your Kane, your Roy Keanes, or whoever there is in the dressing room, that leads the way for them all. If you're going into battle, you need the guy who's going to lift you all up when it goes down. Obviously, judging by what Spence says, obviously that's his opinion. There doesn't seem to be. I'd like to see him lose the shades. I mean, I'm surprised he doesn't play with the shades, to be honest.
Edgar David, sorry.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I saw him come into the stadium for the Europa League game with his Louis Vuitton bucket hat. Oh no, his Burberry bucket hat and the shades on. It was like we're under the spotlights, right? I mean, doesn't for me send a good message out of professionalism, but that's how.
I don't mind that though, Johnny. Because he's unapologetically himself. And
I really don't mind that. I get that, but I mean, listen, you're a professional footballer, and sometimes, compared to, I'm sure, I don't know if everyone's seen it, but go and have a look at the French national squad arriving for training. If you haven't seen it, seek it out.
It's like Paris Fashion Week. It's brilliant. It's
what I will say though, in Jed Spence's case, though, is if the sort of attitude wasn't right, then I would say, look, maybe he's getting carried away. Rio Ferdinand said it at the start of the video, right? If your life is glitz and glamour, you don't stay at the top very long. Correct. But with Jed Spence, some of the stuff he says, the way he carries himself, the way he just kept on persevering, the way he sort of says, look, what was it he said? Football, you don't get everything you deserve in football, and basically he was the one going to the likes of the assistant saying, look, I'm your guy, you got to play me, constantly badgering, he's realized, you've also got to ask, you've got to back yourself to a large degree. And I think there's a lot from that interview that I actually take, and I says, this guy is very aware of his surroundings, he's very aware of what's expected of him as well, laughing at Martinelli when he's asked about Martinelli beating him one-on-one, about the Sessegnon Instagram post about players not going. He's very aware of the industry that he's in. He's very aware of his surroundings. He's very aware of what the fans do and don't like. He doesn't really engage in social media at all, he was saying. For me, I actually don't mind him.
Not quite true.
I don't mind him being himself to a large degree, and all the fashion and stuff like that. That's fine with me as long as the mentality's right, and I think it is right. I like one thing me and Jack have always sort of backed Jed Spence. It's like when you make your dream move to a Premier League club, and straight away the manager drops that bombshell that this is a club signing, a club investment. It sort of alienates you to a large degree, and as a young lad, you are going to lose your head. But after the mistakes that he's made, in terms of timekeeping and stuff like that, he's really got his act together, and he really gets it now, And for me, I have no problem with the likes of the fashion and him being unapologetic.
No, listen,
I think the attitude is right to go with it.
I have to give some context here, right? I have taken so much shit since the day he arrived at this club. Well, a few months after his club for backing him, and all of last season. I went to Coventry last season to see him due to who I know is involved with him, and it's been a rocky road, and I feel vindicated. When I saw him playing and turning on those performances, what, you know more than Ange? And I said, no, I don't know more than Ange, but I'm telling you, there's a player in there that deserves to play that's not getting his chance. Mm-hmm. And for me, for Ange to come out and take all the credit for turning him around, I don't buy that at all, because I know that he found himself in Genoa when he realised and had an epiphany where he realised, you know, unless you turn your shit around and you start applying yourself properly, you're not going to have a career, right? There's so many players that haven't applied themselves properly, got all the talent. He has all the talent in the world. All it is about application. He's applying himself. That's what he's been doing for all of this season, even when he wasn't getting played. And now he's seeing the fruits of his labour. I'd like to see him get called up to the England squad. Unfortunately, now with Skelly getting such a, you know, having such a good
it's
run.
a two-way street. It is a two-way street though, Johnny, right? You know, I do get what you're saying in terms of applying yourself right, you know, and getting the maximum out of your ability and stuff. But the manager also has to do a U-turn where he sent him out on loan the season before and be willing to give him that opportunity. And he ended up giving them that opportunity, you know, and he's sort of being rewarded with it to a certain degree. So it is a bit of a two-way street. I do think you do have to give the manager a bit of credit, you know, for getting more out of him, because when you look at the managers at Tottenham, he has got the most out of them.
I'm sorry. Listen, Dave, I'm not going to sit here and go into the detail, but that ain't true. I mean, it's just not. That's just not true. I listen. I understand why.
You can't say it's not true without going into telling me why it's not true.
Well, I can't go into it, but I'm just saying the perception is one thing, right? The truth of the matter is, right, he stayed on at the club, right, and he got dropped out the Europa League squad, right? So, and he proved himself pre-season, okay? And then for the Carabao Cup, where he was told he was going to play in the cup games, that first Carabao Cup game against Coventry, he was dropped. He didn't get play. He didn't play. Archie Gray played at right back, and the only reason he came on in that game was because Destiny Udogie got injured in that at half time. He came on, scored the goal that got us back into it to avoid an embarrassing defeat in the 87th minute, and then got dropped.
He had a groin injury though after that for a period.
Not straight away. No, he didn't. Not straight away. Not straight away. He did after that, but not straight away. Anyway, let's leave it there. Sorry.
Well, we still have some other, you know, talking points from it. I mean, Sam, he did say that football hasn't been fair to him, Jed Spence. Would you agree with that? That maybe he's been a victim of, you know, not being technically treated in the best of ways? He even sort of went on to say, you know, people are happy to see him get a second chance at doing well. He said, I never really got a first chance to begin with. What do you make of, you know, that comment? And would you agree that maybe Jed Spence hasn't been treated fairly? And, you know, the fact that maybe so many managers, in his opinion, have been unfair to him?
Yeah, I mean, I think the interview had some good sound bits. I'm going to sort of come back to your question, Jack, if that's all right. I personally didn't like that he did the interview, not because it's him. I've just got this thing in my head that, like, professional players who are playing still shouldn't do, effectively, in my opinion, like a glamour or like a glazing, as the youth say, interview, right? You know, you got Rio Ferdinand going, oh, Jed Spence, Ballon d'Or, give him Ballon d'Or. You know what I mean? With how Rio is. And I just think that as much as I like, you know, I like parts of the interview, like, don't get me wrong, like I've also been banging the Jed Spence drum, maybe not as long as Johnny has, because I didn't know him as much as a player, but I was wondering why for a while he wasn't getting a fair shake. And especially with those Conte comments right at the beginning, I was very confused with the whole thing, and I did feel bad for him, and maybe that answers your question a little bit, Jack, that he was treated unfairly, you know. To round it off maybe a bit more on that specific question, if it's so many managers have the same or a similar view, you know, maybe his head's not in the game, because I feel like if you watch Spence play, and you know, we've been lucky enough to see him play now a decent number of games this season, not as many as I believe he should have played based on his ability, but football, you know, as Ange says, is not just about ability. It's about your application, and, you know, it's easy for players to say, oh, you know, I put everything in training, or and look, I'm just speculating, right? I'm not here saying I know everything about everything, but there's obviously reasons why it hasn't worked out in certain places. And look, don't get me wrong, like I'm sure that there's stuff off the pitch that has affected players, you know, Jed Spence included. Not necessarily things that he's done negatively, but things that have had a negative impact on him and his personality and his attitude towards the game. And as Johnny said, you know, he said in the interview, I went to Genoa and I felt loved, and maybe that was kind of what he was missing, to think that
he's always needed that though, Sam. You know, I've said that before. You know, when he made that move, was it from Middlesbrough to Forest? You know, the love he got. You know, he's always been that guy where he needs that arm around his shoulder.
Yeah, look, I myself am very much like that. You know, I'm not a footballer in any way, shape, or form. You know, I can kick it about a little bit. I got a bit about me. I do play right back as well, and have known people to play left back. Don't think I can do it inverted, but you know, if I was in the training, maybe you'd see it if I had the fitness. The thing with the interview for me is, I don't think he should have done it personally. Okay. Did I enjoy it? I enjoyed it in parts. I just think that you're opening up a can of worms, and look, I don't want to get like political with it, but we see a lot how the media treats young black players or players of color. And as much as I don't think he necessarily came off as arrogant, I could understand why people will look at that and go, oh, Jed Spence laughed when they mentioned Martinelli. And, you know, maybe he laughed at Martinelli because he already skinned him when they played, when Forest played them in the cup a few years ago before we signed him. I just think that, you know, Ange won't be happy. And look, you know, I'm not Ange's biggest fan, but I don't think that Ange will be happy that effectively, even if it's not all about him, that Spence is there airing out dirty laundry for the world to see, which is a bit, you know, back to my original
Is it not better him telling? Is it not better him though, Sam, telling his side of the story rather than letting up the media and fans make up their own opinion?
No, because I don't necessarily see the point of that right now. You know, you've got your whole life ahead of you to you know, talk about all this stuff. We're in a very, very difficult part of the season, right? And you know, I've been critical of a lot of facets of Spurs, and for a player to come in and kind of, you know, he didn't necessarily only criticize Ange, but you know, there was parts where he said like the new manager came in and, you know, when managers come in, you're supposed to get a fair shake. And, you know, they told me the manager hasn't seen much of you. And, you know, these are things that will, you know, they will play in Postecoglou's mind, as professional as he wants to be, or as professional as he is. I think that there are some things that don't need to be said. And yes, for us fans and content creators, it's interesting, right, to hear this stuff.
Well, and to get these little tidbits. In defense of Jed Spence, though, I'd much rather him be sitting there doing an interview with an ex-professional player who maybe he leads on for advice and guidance and stuff like that than people being out of the darts. But when I mention about players being out of the darts, everyone says they're allowed to go and live their life. You know, they're human beings. They're allowed to go and do that. What's worse, night out of the darts where there's drinking and everything else involved, or sit down with an ex-professional footballer who's well regarded in the game?
The interview. I'm sorry. Like, we have very, very differing views on this darts thing. I get where you're coming from, but I don't see why going and doing this interview is any different in your mind to going to the darts. We're still in a shit position, right? And I feel like, so maybe I don't fully understand your reasoning for the why you were so angry at Maddis for the darts. I understand it in
Madison and Johnson.
Has he done any harm? You know, like it's not like he's done any harm, you know, to Ange Postecoglou or to the team. You know, whereas the darts, you would say, might.
What harm was the darts though?
The big difference for me on it, the big difference for me on it is you've got two players that weren't in the team at the time out at the darts when they should be focusing. Jed Spence has been playing well, you know, and being at an interview where there's not good time Charlies around him. There's not alcohol and all this shit around him. It's much different to then a night out at the darts and stuff like that. Completely different. Being out at the darts is worse. That's what Rio Ferdinand was talking out at the start. You know, the glitz and glamour lifestyle. You don't last at the top like that. Go and do an interview with Rio Ferdinand is completely different environment. You know, it shows that Jed Spence isn't putting himself in them environments where there is alcohol and party people and all that around. He's literally just going to an interview, a complete different situation.
But I don't know. I think I don't want to get too bogged down on the whole darts debate because we've had it before. But I just think that, you know, I do subscribe to the notion like they are just humans at the end of the day. Like, yes, we lost that game and they went out and, you know, they were pictured, but you know, like I don't see why they should just lock themselves at home. And look, I know I've technically criticized Jed for doing the interview, but I'm not necessarily critical. I'm just saying that the way that I see it is, I don't think that any of this needed to be said so much to the point that you go on a podcast to say it. Personally, this is my opinion. I watched the interview and I was like, look, yeah, you know, there's interesting points to it. I feel like it builds into the narrative that we hear about Spence where, you know, managers in the past have said things like, you know, they mentioned it on the podcast. He'll either be a Premier League player or a non-league player, and you know, he doesn't need to come back at those things because I feel like his performances have been dispelling that narrative anyway. So for him to feel the need to, you know, go on that interview, I question what his motives were behind it. What drew him to doing the interview personally.
Well, you know, I think we'll touch on maybe some of the things that he did clear the air on that maybe he rightfully did. You know, for example, and Antonio Conte and Daniel Harris has helped me out on that. I just want to quickly take, you know, some of the members' milestones here because they are very, very generous. Kaylee earlier, like I said, becoming an elite member, and then the two Mark Show Cookie member for 15 months, I believe, as a Flat Cap member, saying, "Big up, lads, keep up the great work. Come on, you Spurs." Very kind to us. The Mark Army has been. And then Hennessy, member for 28 months. Big up to you, Hennessy. Well over 2 years at this stage. Saying, "Afternoon, gentlemen. Looking forward to this convo. Keeping up all the hard work. Jensa does not go unnoticed. Congrats on 17K. Only just noticed." And then he said that's a bit of an oxymoron. I think we'll take it, Hennessy. Very, very kind to us, man. And 17K will keep pushing, you know, at this stage. But we did have also Dermatron, 37 months, I believe, as an elite member as well. Big up to you, Tron, sir. He said, "Big up, guys. Keep doing what you are doing. Come on, you Spurs." And then he's also sent in a super sticker, probably just giving some plaudits to everybody. And, you know, we're trying our best, you know, over international break to continue to talk about Spurs, continue to find, you know, different angles and, you know, topics and opinions and, you know, keeping it always football related. But thank you very much for the support, Tron. And, you know, we're going to go on to maybe what Daniel Harris brought up earlier, where he did say, you know, I've not actually seen, you know, this interview yet. Did he blast Conte and how did that come across? Well, we'll get to that now. These are some of the quotes that he had to say about Antonio Conte. He said, "I felt like whatever I did, that man just wasn't happy about anything. Even if you did the right thing, you would think, did I even do the right thing there? He's not really necessarily a complimenting guy." He revealed later that he only had one conversation with Antonio Conte and that his comments about him had a very negative impact on Jed Spence's mood. He said, "It wasn't a nice feeling, to be honest. I was coming into the club on a high. I was confident. I was buzzing. I had a great season and just won promotion with my club. When I came in, I just ran into a brick wall. Really, it was shattering my confidence a bit. I'm young as well, so it's not nice to hear." I mean, one of the benefits, you know, Johnny and Sam, is that we did get to, you know, get some sort of, you know, kind of clarity and some transparency on what Jed Spence did think of the whole Antonio Conte feud. Dave and I from the get-go felt like it was unfair to him because he was sort of being used as a pawn between Daniel Levy and Antonio Conte. And personally, I just don't think that's very fair to a player. But what are your guys' thoughts on the fact that he did clear the air, maybe, you know, the drama before with Antonio Conte?
I just think this has been played out for such a long time. You know, we filled in the blanks. The press filled in the blanks. We didn't have any context. We only second guessed what had really gone on. You know, what I know about is probably a few months after that. it's the first time we've had some insight from the other side, and why shouldn't we hear it from his point of view? No one else has wanted to. No one from the club has said the truth and what really went on. Conte's the only one who spoke, and quite honestly, he didn't need to say it. He didn't need to say anything. You know, he could have had a quiet word with Jed, said whatever he wanted to say. But to do that and wash your linen in public and basically say he's no bloody good and I don't want him is demoralising. And he's got every right to answer that because, you know, in fairness to him, he could have answered this back in the last 2 or 3 years, couldn't he? You know, he could have gone to Leeds. He could have gone to any of the clubs that he went to afterwards and said, you know what? I mean, yeah, I'm in a bad place, but it's all because of Conte and what Conte did. And Conte did this and Conte did that. But he hasn't. And he's waited for a time when he's actually on form and people realise that, you know, he isn't crap. And he feels like he can speak from the point. But I think the Conte thing has been said now. We've got the context. We finally heard from the person that really matters, and that's Jed himself, how he felt about it. We've heard what Conte thinks. The club are never going to say a word. So that's it. There's the balance between this is what Conte had to say. He didn't give him a chance, really. Went out and, you know, this is where we are now. And I think the positive from all of this is he's come through the adversity. He's made lots of mistakes, lots of them, behaved badly. You know, we all done it. We've all come round. We've all gone to the extreme at some point in our life, or most people have, and realised you've been an arse and turn it round. And that's what we should be focusing on now, is my opinion. And he needs to focus on his game because we got three massive games coming up in the next few days.
Well, what do you make of it, Sam, that, you know, he did sort of touch back on the Antonio Conte kind of business and whatnot? I mean, Johnny's saying, right, you know, maybe he could have cleared it out earlier, but now he's chosen to do it now, you know, on the Rio Ferdinand podcast. So, you know, we now have some more clarity on how Jed feels about Antonio Conte. To be honest, though, not much of it was really a surprise. I think we knew that he was pretty hurt by it.
Yeah, look, I definitely agree. I feel like I'm going to play a slightly controversial figure in this, and because I do really like Jed. I want to make that clear. Like I really like him, but I want to also try and give like some of the other side. What Johnny said about, like, you know, he waited until like he was in good form. If he'd done it before, it would not have had any impact whatsoever. It would have just been like, sour grapes. This guy's like, you know, he's failing at Rennes, he's failing at Leeds. He's just out here, like, you know, trying to get clicks, trying to stay relevant because his career's like petering out. So I obviously, like, look, as I said before, like looking at it from a fan perspective and a content creator perspective, like I love it, right? You know, it was a good little tidbit of, you know, he was never happy. We had one conversation, and it did also, like, you know, it does make you feel for the guy. He's come into a new club at, what was he, like 22? And the first thing, he's finally got his step up to the Premier League, which he could have had anyway with the club that I know he was on loan, but you'd think that Forest would have probably tried to sign him. He could have been in the Premier League off his own merit by getting there himself, not just by getting bought. Not that there's any, I'm criticizing or downplaying being bought by a team in the Premier League. I mean, that in itself is an achievement, right? But I think that, you know, it's obviously really harsh to be that age. And, you know, I'm 26, and when people talk shit about me, you know, I go home and I'm like Mario Balotelli putting my shirt over my head, like, why always me? You know, woe is me. And I do feel for the guy, and I do think it humanized him, like, well. And as much as I said I don't think he should have done it, he did do it, and I do think he came across pretty well.
Do you feel like, though, it's a good example, though, like Dave and Sam, of like when he brought up that football just isn't fair sometimes? Dave and I had a conversation about this in a pre-record that will be out tomorrow, but you know, this is a good example of where things could be out of your control, right? Where his agent he said, it's kind of hinted at, maybe his former agent, made this move to Spurs. He didn't realize, that this wasn't maybe a club where he was necessarily wanted. It was Daniel Levy that sort of negotiated the move with that agent. And then Antonio Conte seemed to not even want him in the first place, which as a player, it's kind of out of your control then. And that isn't necessarily fair to you. And he felt like, in Jed Spence's opinion and his own experience, he did feel like he did everything in his power to try to win over Antonio Conte, despite Conte's reluctance to want to include him. And he just said, I was trying to do this, I was trying to do that, and I wasn't getting any real feedback of any kind, wasn't getting any real validation. So isn't that kind of an example of what he meant earlier? Football just maybe isn't fair to players sometimes.
I think 2 lessons to learn from that though, Jack, is one, make sure you have trust in your agent and that he's there to represent the best interest of you and not his own pockets. But 2, making sure that you've got the right people around you. It's absolutely crucial having the right people around you in terms of that. But also what is in your control, how you react, stuff like that, I think is absolutely crucial. But the big thing for me is that's why it's crucial that the club are trying to work with the manager and bringing in the players that they want at the time. Look, Conte clearly wanted another right back. He didn't want Jed Spence. That's why he made the comments when he first arrived at the football club that it's more of a club investment than what I need. And then also you look at the man management style. And what Jed Spence needs, man management. Jed Spence is a guy that needs love, an arm around the shoulder. Conte's not that guy. And that's where recruitment is really, really important moving forward. Like in hindsight, we can all sit here and say, look how Jed Spence has been. Look how good Jed Spence has been. Conte should have used him. But the reality is, if it's not a player that the manager wants, we can't keep expecting the manager to keep using these guys for work miracles. That's why I've always said, it's important that if you're bringing in a manager and you believe that he's the guy to go and win you things, that you match that recruitment up, you work with him, and to a large degree, give him what he needs, because it avoids situations like this. Situations like this, all you're doing is just, we're lucky enough that Jed Spence has had that bounce back ability, that he's resilient. Many other footballers would crumble underneath that, and their career would die off to a large degree. Do you know what I mean? They wouldn't be able to handle it. So, that's the sort of business side of football that maybe people don't get. But also, I think the human element to it, some of them loan moves, when these players go out on loan, Jack, all we care about is have they played and what have they done. But no one takes into account, being in hotel rooms, different cultures, different food that necessarily you don't like, the human element side to it that all helps your performance on the football pitch. We always hear a lot of the top footballers, what you do off the pitch helps you on the pitch to a large degree. And there's so much there that I think Jed Spence has highlighted that maybe we as fans don't take into account sometimes. And, when I look at the guy, I think he's a very vulnerable sort of guy. I think he's being misled by his agent, being mismanaged to a certain degree between clubs and stuff like that. And I think he's a guy that doesn't trust too many people. I heard him at the start saying being a footballer is a bit lonely. But one thing I take from it is now that he is a very focused individual, he understands what he needs to do going forward. You hear him at the start of the interview saying, if you want to make it to the top, you've got to be obsessed with football. Even off the pitch, you've got to gear everything to on the pitch. He clearly gets it. He backs his ability. And the biggest thing, he's gone out there and he's took that opportunity. How many times have we said that? It's one thing getting an opportunity, but so many times you see players coming in, even young players, doing the basics, just passing it backwards, getting their stats up. Jed Spence didn't do that. He come in and made an impact, and fair play to the guy. And I think, I actually really respect Jed Spence for doing that interview, because one thing for me is, it's very easy sitting there letting fans paint the narrative, or sitting there letting the media paint the narrative of what's going on. And this is my big problem with modern day players. Back in the day, you had players, they'd finish up, they'd be in the local pub, be speaking to people, interacting with fans and stuff. Nowadays, a lot of them think they're untouchable, and beyond that, I think when it comes to Jed Spence, he's putting his side across. He's not being media trained like everybody else is. When a lot of these other players go in for these interviews and all this sort of stuff, they're media trained and stuff like that. Jed Spence is telling his story, and I have no problem with that whatsoever. I think he's come out looking very, very good off the back of that interview. And I think, he highlights things that we all moan about, right? Players liking ex-players' Instagram and stuff like that. After the session, go, no one wants to see that. Jed Spence gets that. Not popping at fans on social media. Jed Spence gets that. He's asked about the leaders, and he said, look, Son and Madison are this type of leadership. We don't have a shouty sort of leader, old school sort of leader and stuff. He's a guy that's very tuned in and knows what's needed moving forward. And for me, I think he comes out smelling roses.
I think he's provided a lot of clarity for Spurs fans, kind of whether they wanted it or not, in certain situations. Does anybody have anything else to, touch on the Conte situation before we touch on another thing that Jed had to say about, this time it's going to be about Ange Postecoglou, but did anybody have any other thoughts about him and Antonio Conte?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, not necessarily in defense of Jed, and also maybe it will come up as in defense of Conte, but just to be clear, like, I hated Conte so much, even though I wanted him. I hated him so much, I'd stopped going to the games because I just couldn't bring myself to watch it. And as much as I don't agree with the comments that he made, alienating Jed when he first came in, when you're looking at the likes of Hakimi as your right back, you want players with experience at the highest level, your likes of Bastoni, Skriniar, whoever else we were linked to at the time. Obviously, he brought Perisic in. And then the club goes out and buys you some, nobody you've never heard of. Because let's be honest, I doubt Conte was watching the EFL. I can understand why he was angry, but the problem with what Conte did is he basically took his frustrations and his dissatisfaction with the club out on a player who was completely innocent in the whole thing. So I don't agree with what Conte did at all, and I don't want Conte back. Just like people in the comments will be like, "Oh, this guy's like he's loving Conte. Look at him." But no, I don't feel that way at all. I just can kind of understand why he was so angry, not necessarily why he made the comments. And I think as well, I saw that Coogan, or if that's how you pronounce the name, comment pop up about Dave being deluded about having an arm around the shoulder. I'm pretty sure he basically says that in the interview. He literally says like,
"Oh, some people just don't listen.
Loved.
They just choose not to listen, Sam."
Yeah. He said he needed to be loved, or he said that being loved basically gave him the boost that he needed. And
so now
he doesn't need some. Yeah, exactly. He doesn't need someone, on their knees, doing everything they can to. I'll keep it PC. Doing everything they can to keep him happy, but as he said, he needed some recognition, and he realized afterwards that. And I'll link it back to the point about the leadership, because when they asked him that question, he paused for a good 5 seconds, probably longer, and there was a very awkward pause where he's thinking, "Who do I even say here?" And it was interesting at the beginning when he said, "When I came to the club, I didn't feel like I could say anything because I was like kind of in awe of the likes of Harry Kane and Son." And then he basically went on to say, and I read into it too much, but for me, he basically went on to say, "There's no one in the squad that I respect enough to like hold my tongue now. I'm a big dog in the club. I've been in the squad for 6 months at most, and I already feel like I'm a big enough presence to basically, say what I want to say when I feel like it needs to be said." So for that, I do commend him in that as well, and I feel like it was a pretty bad indictment of the mentality and the leadership in the squad, even though he did say I get like leadership from certain players.
I think he was kind of also, I think it's a good point, Sam, and I think he was trying to point out that he learned to back himself, because in order to back himself and to sort of stand up for himself, that's the best thing for his career. In order for him to get minutes, or for him to even be considered by a coach, you have to sort of stand up for yourself in some regard. That's what he seemed to sort of lay out there, and I think that's very apt. By the way, everybody, I'm noticing there are plenty of people popping in the house. If you are watching us over on X or over on Twitter, feel free to follow us over to YouTube, by the way. But thanks for clicking the link and following us here. And Rob Wallace just now gifted out 10 memberships, and very, very, very generous of you, Rob. And it's gone out to a lot of familiar faces as well. So we'd love to see some people take advantage of it, and come on the fan show. It's pinned at the top of the chat. We're doing like a hybrid sort of fan show tomorrow, about an hour and a half or so, where basically anybody is free to come on, but we'll be back to regular fan show sort of duties, the following Monday. but Inacoma has been gifted one. You know, we've seen him as a member. He's been gifted one. Gavin Hines, very familiar name. Fiona as well. JC Virals, Laura B, Adrian, big up to you, Adrian. Callum Blatch, Serg71 or Surge71, C-Max, and Donovan Osterreicher have all been gifted fan show memberships. So please take advantage of it. And Rob, hopefully you're doing okay, and hopefully you're enjoying the conversation. And, you know, we're in a way, you know, when we're trying to keep all these sort of Spurs streams, you know, football related to a degree, I'm pretty happy that Jed Spence came out with this interview, because it definitely gave us a bit more to talk about to a degree during this pretty boring international break. But we're going to finish off on, you know, the praise that he had for Ange Postecoglou, Dave. You know, he did sort of validate what Ange Postecoglou is doing on the football pitch. He praised the attack-minded sort of philosophy, and he said the players enjoy it. It's a fun way of playing. It's attacking football. I get to go forward a lot and come inside into the middle of the pitch where all the commotion is. He says that is the method. That is the way. To be fair to the manager, we will never get in trouble for playing his way, even if we are under pressure. If we play his way, he will take it on himself. And then he said, in comparison to Conte's training, it was very repetitive. We would do the same session almost every day. With Ange, it's a little bit different. We do certain drills every day, but there might be a different passing drill or different attacks that we end up doing. He switches it up quite a bit. Johnny, I know Ange Postecoglou has been criticized before for, you know, being very repetitive, you know, being a guy that's very stubborn. You know, Jed Spence has a lot of praise for the guy. He says that he likes the attack-minded football, and he says that even the training sessions are a whole lot more interesting and, you know, thrilling to whatever degree, you know, than what Antonio Conte was doing.
Yeah, well, it's really worked out well, hasn't it? I mean, listen. Yeah. PR. Listen, look, you can talk all you like, but the talking is done on the pitch. Okay, that's where it's done. Okay, not in the training ground, on the pitch. Okay, so you can do nothing all week and turn up on that pitch and perform and win games. We know what's been going on in the training. First of all, Ange doesn't take training. Ange watches training. It's done by others. He watches from afar. He distances himself from the players. He's always said that. Doesn't have any sort of big emotional contact. He doesn't practice set pieces. I think we've seen the fantastic attacking set pieces was on show a couple of weeks back when Sonny and Maddison stood over a free kick, and it was a complete and utter shitfest. It was an embarrassment.
Ange would set the training structure for the week, though, wouldn't he? Wouldn't he be in charge of, like, you know, telling them what drills to use and stuff like that? I know what you're saying, that he doesn't have hands on, but that's sort of always been the way at football clubs, though, Johnny, where managers, that's why they have coaching teams. They usually take up warm ups and the drills and stuff. The manager has always sort of had an overview of it and the planning of it, right?
Most managers, top managers, bring their team with them wherever they go, right? Here we have a manager who doesn't care who comes along. You know, our new people, we had a clear out in the summer because they weren't really on board with all of Ange's methodology. Scott and a few other trainers and what have you, they left. Look, I'm not buying it. I'm sorry, I'm not buying it. If it was working well, and the system was working well, we'd see a lot more evidence of it on the pitch. What I would say is, though, we have seen Ange resort to not playing Ange ball anymore because his job is on the line and trying to adapt, which is what we asked him to do, in fairness, to try and get a result. But that hasn't worked either. Unfortunately, I was having to go through that nonsense at Fulham the other week. And I think I mentioned this to you a couple of weeks ago when I was watching Maddison and Son and the subs warm up, the 7 substitutes. Yeah. He made 7 subs because we got an 18-day break, so we thought he'd give them a rest. And when I was stood there, I was watching them. They had a trainer who looked like a Peter Crouch lookalike. It looked like a teacher in the playground telling the kids what to do, and none of them were listening. They were pushing each other about, you know, the headlocks, the arsing around, which is great when you've won the majority of your games, but when you've lost over half of them, you see, that would be, if you're winning most of the games and you're seeing that behaviour, that would be cast, I guess, as confidence. When you are watching that before the game against Fulham, and I'm saying, is this how they're going to go on the pitch? Look at it, right? It's wrong. They're not fired up. This is a distraction. I got a whole load of crap from people as I was videoing, but it all came to be. It came to pass. And, you know, they came out on that pitch that first half and didn't do anything. Yeah, they fired it up for the 15 minutes. But I think fundamentally, there isn't a leader. There's something fundamentally wrong.
Do you know when I think about it, you know, and it big up, but it goes to what Matt sort of Barden says here. Like, the thing is, when it comes to Jed Spence talking about, you know, when you're saying there about, you know, Postecoglou sort of not having hands-on approach in training, that's been pretty common in football for a long, long time. You do have the odd manager who does want to be hands-on and, you know, stops the ball every 2 minutes and stuff like that. You do have the odd guy that does that, but usually, you know, especially at big clubs, you do have a training team underneath you, and they do take a lot of the sessions and stuff like that, and you do have a more sort of broad overview. But, you know, I do agree that to a certain degree, this sort of project does need a bit more of a hands-on approach. And I'm just wondering, is that where maybe the number 2 comes in? Does he need a stronger number 2? You know, a bit like what Harry Redknapp had. You know, I remember, what was it, Joe Jordan on the bench, you know, with Gennaro Gattuso, people like that. You know, maybe he just needs to get the right number 2 in beside him, a strong number 2, you know, good cop, bad cop, because that's notoriously what, you know, they usually try to do with the manager and the, you know, assistant manager. One's the good guy, one's the bad guy, vice versa. You know, if the manager's the bad guy, the assistant's usually the guy they can go and speak to, or vice versa. And maybe that is something that Ange needs to look into, maybe bringing in, you know, a stronger minded number 2, someone that will bollock people, maybe get more hands-on the training pitch on his behalf. Maybe that is something we can look at. But what I will say is, the players don't have to go as far as what they do say about Ange when they come out and speak about him. You know, James Maddison has spoke about, you know, the injuries playing a massive part, etc. Jed Spence has come out here and said, we enjoy playing. Look, most players will tell you they want to play out from the back. They want to play this sort of football. Most players will tell you, you know, they're absolutely delighted if the manager is taking the heat off the dressing room. That's what they want. And what I will say sort of stands to Ange Postecoglou to a degree, and I think largely, bar the Europa League, is another large reason why he's probably still in the job, is the fact that these players are still out there batting for him. They haven't given up on him like they did under a Conte, like they did under a Jose Mourinho. They're not showing that them sort of signs of discontent and stuff.
Where were they at Fulham? Where were they in these other? Where were these?
Look, I'm not excusing the results. Don't get me wrong. I'm not excusing the results and stuff like that.
I just saw what I saw, Dave. What I'm trying to express here is what I saw here was unprofessionalism, right? And go back to this Harry Redknapp business. I loved Harry Redknapp, and do not compare or confuse Harry Redknapp with Ange Postecoglou, because Harry, although Kevin Bond and Jordan took training, he was standing by. He got involved. Yes, he went out for his cup of tea and what have you, but he had banter with the kid, banter with them. He didn't distance himself from all the players like Ange does. And he also, during a game, you're not going to tell me Harry Redknapp stood there with his hands in his pocket looking at the ground and not interacting. He was vocal, and it's a combination of all those things. But I agree with you as well, Dave. This notion that it doesn't matter who you bring along. You know, you should be having teams work with you that understand every facet of your game. Why should the coaches be coming in and have to learn what Ange wants for them to teach the players what Ange wants? They should understand from day one exactly what Ange wants. So when they hit the ground, they're hitting the ground running. They're not having to understand and learn what Ange wants because they already know. That's what you get with, you know, Pochettino or Ancelotti or Nuno or any of the top guys. You know what I mean? That's the way it is.
No. Look, I agree with what you're saying there, lad. But, you know, again, you know, is that a Postecoglou problem or is that a club problem? Because some of these coaches were still here under Conte. You know, people forget that. You know, the club when Conte was coming in, he wanted to bring a team with him, and the club said, "Well, no, you can only have certain people of the team that you can bring in, and you're going to work with what's here to a certain degree."
Well, the best one has left. Davis, he was our best one. He's gone to Birmingham, and he's done a fantastic job there. They're going to go up. You know, he's got the backing with the Americans now, and he'll probably do extremely well. But look, we all want the club to do well. You know, we don't want to, you know, have a negative mindset. But it's hard to have a positive mindset when you go to, you know, I'm not the only one. There's many of us that go home and away. And when you see the effort and the time and the money that these people spend, I live in London, but there's people that come from Bournemouth, from up north or whatever. They travel all over the country like I do. And to come to the games like this and see the lack of effort and drive to win the game, I can guarantee you, come the night when we play Frankfurt, every single one of those players will be fired up wanting to win it because there's something at stake for them. There's a chance for a bit of glory. There's no glory playing away at Fulham. And that's what I've got exception to, because what we need to do right now is try to create some momentum and win a few games back to back, not just turn up for 2 games or 3 games for the rest of the season.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, I think we're all, you know, a bit confused if it's going to be like a West Ham sort of season, you know, in the Conference League, you know, if we're just going to continue to stink it up in the Premier League, but end up showing up on the important nights, which is the Europa League. At least I'm retaining that hope. I'm just Ryan Trestane, becoming a fan show member. Thank you very much, sir. Everybody, like I said, next Monday we'll be back to regular business, regular schedule. We'll have definitely a lot more to be able to talk about. Like I said, hilariously, luckily, we did get this Jed Spence interview, provided maybe some good substance to work with for today's panel show. But next Monday will be a regular fan show. But if you are eager and want to come on, you can come on for free tomorrow on that Big Up platform. We'll be kind of doing a little bit of a different sort of style to it. We'll allow tons of people to come on. Dave and I will just sort of fire questions at you guys, have more of a round table sort of discussion, even though, of course, it's all on screen. And we'll kind of have it where, you know, people can bounce off of each other type of fan show instead of, you know, you guys waiting in line doing it one at a time. So hopefully you guys enjoy it. Shall we move on to the Romero news, everybody? You know, this is something that's broke today from various ITKs. I'm not too sure whether I believe it or not, but Atletico Madrid are preparing, you know, a bid as well as preparing, you know, I think the initial process to try to lure over Christian Romero over to their club. He also just recently hinted at some displeasure with the Tottenham medical staff. Some of his quotes did include saying, "I didn't have a good few months because it was an injury that I could have returned from much sooner," he told reporters in Montevideo after just playing Uruguay. And he said, "I'm always grateful that the national team's medical team was able to get me out of that bad moment and get me back on the field, which is what I like to do." Now, he's taken stabs again at the medical team, Christian Romero. He hasn't shied away from that. And then also recently, you know, he's to a degree, you know, been rumored to leave the club. Do we want Romero to leave the club? And do we believe that Romero would leave the club this summer? I'll go to Sam first since I went to Johnny first a few times. Sam, do you want Romero to leave? Do you believe Romero will leave?
I don't want him to leave. I think I've been pretty vocal in how I feel about the whole thing. I get other people's points of, you know, we should be keeping our best players. But I also believe that if a player wants out, you know, and they're not putting in the required level, which personally I don't think that Romero was up until the injury. You know, now I've gotten to the point where things have gotten so bad. I've needed him back desperately. But you know, if I do think he will leave, unless we win the Europa League, and even then, I still think that he will leave.
Do you not think we're a better team when he plays, though, Sam?
I do, Dave. In terms of an attacking sense,
which is what the man
last season.
Though, right?
Yeah, but last season as well, I also thought he had a good season when he was fit and when he was available.
Yeah.
This season though, I've been very disappointed in him. Not just because he's been out so much, but
defensively,
the vast majority of the goals, in my opinion, that we conceded while he was in the team came down his and Porro's side. And, maybe that's 70-30 Porro rather than Romero, but he's still on that side. In terms of the Atletico links, I could see that happening, to be honest. Maybe it's not the glamour name of like a Barcelona or Real Madrid, but honestly, I think that Romero and Atletico Madrid would fit like a glove, because of obviously Simeone being an Argentine, but also just the ideology of Atletico as I see it from the outside. I just think that he would love the gung ho, full-bloodedness of playing for
Shithousery.
Atletico. Exactly, and his quality would bring them a new dimension or another dimension to their game, and I just think that he'd end up being an absolute hero there. If he went there, they'd be challenging for the league. They'd be in the Champions League every season. He'd be playing with they've got is it DePaul in midfield? They've got Molina at right back. There are Argentines there. Obviously, they've got Julian Alvarez as well. I think that that is a real possibility, and Atletico do pay big money, like for some players. We've seen them go big for Alvarez. We've seen them go huge, colossal even for João Felix. I know that didn't work out, but they're not afraid to put their money where their mouth is when they want to play it.
True.
So if they were to offer big money, I could see that happening.
Yeah, and they offer big money for Gallagher. They offer big money for Julian Alvarez, and if Simeone stays, I mean, they'll do pretty much everything that he wants, in order to keep him there. So there's something to that. I'm not too sure though, Johnny, if I necessarily believe the rumors that Romero is likely to leave this summer or anything, but you might think differently on this. Do you believe these rumors that have come out today that he's being lined up for a move, or is this something that is just sort of being put out there just to cause a stir?
Italian Defender of the Year, 2-time Copa America winner, World Cup winner, made every team of every tournament he's been in. The guy has ambition. He wants to win. This club has no ambition. So we talk about ambition, but we don't deliver ambition. And that's why there's a demonstration coming up on the 6th of April. And, because of that lack of ambition. And he's a winner. You can criticize him all you like, guys, right? But if we had a team of winners like Christian Romero, we would not be where we are today. It's as simple as that. And, you want to pick stones and say he had a bad start to the season. 100% he had a bad start to the season. But I predicted he had a bad start to the season before the season started. Why? Because he played a full season, then had to go straight to the Copa America, had a falling out with the club because they wanted him to go to Australia to play in a meaningless game against Newcastle, flew out, played some friendly games for the Copa America, played every game in the Copa America, came back, had 2 weeks. 2 weeks, guys, 2 weeks.
I said this the other day.
Not 5 weeks, 2 weeks, right? And then you wonder why he made a mistake against Leicester. And you wonder why, when you look at Pedro Porro, who's played too many games, why he's making mistake after mistake after mistake. They're human beings. They're not machines. The guy's a winner. Listen, you've only got to see, he came back the other day, right, in those games, and he's bringing the ball out. And whereas Danso and all those other players, I'm not putting them down, but they're looking up and they can't find the pass. They pass the ball back, they pass it to the goalkeeper, they pass it sideways. He brings it out, Romero, and he finds the pass. Yeah. He's got a great pass. And when you're 1-0 down or 2-1 down or whatever in a game, he's the guy that's going to pick up the ball and drive forward that you're going to find in the penalty box trying to get that winning goal, right? We don't have winners in our team. And if we're going to sell our winners, we might as well give up the ghost right now because... 100%. I just don't get it. And, if he does go, and I really don't blame him for wanting to go, I really don't. He's coming up to 27. He's coming up to the prime of his career. There's only one player. If we're going to get the money that we deserve, and you're not going to sell him. Listen, we ain't going to sell him. right? He can kick up all the stink, but he's going to have to pay, 85, 90 million pound or more for him. There's only one player that you can buy that will appease me, and that's Dean Huijsen, right? And I'm not sure I can see that one coming up. He had his first game, Dean Huijsen, for Spain the other day, and he was unbelievable. I'm telling you, that kid is absolute class. But I want Romero to stay. And although slagging him off, I get it, I understand it, but you've got to look at the bigger picture and the context.
No, we slag off our best players far too often. It's the Harry Kane saga all over again. This is Harry Kane 2.0 here, where, when it was coming up to Harry Kane's time, people were like, oh yeah, but there are games where he doesn't affect the game. We look these guys to do it every single game, and we don't ask enough of the players that do of lesser ability around them to actually contribute more. When it comes to Romero, everyone's well quick to dig out his mistakes, the few that they can remember. But when it comes to players like Ben Davies or Dyer or Sanchez as in the past, everyone made all the excuses for them being bang average. And this culture has to stop at Tottenham Hotspur. Can't sit here and keep protecting the underdog, and when you've got the big dog, keep throwing them under the bus. Right. We have to keep Romero here. He is our best centre-back. We're trying to play attacking football. We are much better when he's in the team because of what he offers in terms of on the ball, but also out of possession. He's one of our hardest hitters, and we need him. I've watched time and time again that guy hit a striker and him not want to know for the rest of the game. We need to do all we can to keep him here. We haven't built that stadium and them training complexes for the likes of your Johnsons and your Davies and stuff. We've built them for the likes of your Romeros, your Kanes and peoples like that. We can't keep selling our best players. If we already speak about lack of leadership, lack of winning mentality and stuff like that. Why do we keep wanting to sell guys that do have that's actually trying to get everyone else up to that standard? We can't keep making this same mistake. You sell Romero, guess we will fall even further back than what we have this year, in my opinion. I agree with Johnny. I think it'll take someone to come in with a 90 plus, 100 million plus for us to even consider it as a football club. But I wonder.
Do you think his head has turned, Dave, according to Matt's comment? Maybe that Simeone has spoken to him potentially, and that could have turned his head. Do you believe that could have happened?
The difference between Harry Kane and Romero, Harry Kane came through the academy. He felt like he owed Tottenham. Romero owes Tottenham absolutely nothing. Right. And let's be brutally honest, right? When you're signing players like that, they don't have the love for the football club. So if we don't get European football next season, well, then no one really knows what to expect from us next season. Are we going to benefit from not having Europe and kick on again up the league and stuff like that? Or are we going to struggle to a large part like we did this season? There's too many unknowns. And when you don't have European football, it leaves you vulnerable for picking off your best players. And that's something I've tried to highlight this season, the importance of us getting European football so we don't lose our best players. We can't keep going down this route. We talk about wanting to win trophies, but we keep letting serial winners walk away from this club. And that includes managers, by the way, not just players. We can't keep doing this. We've got to keep our best players. You want to build a squad, you want to go and compete with the likes of Man Cities and stuff like that, you keep your best players. Also, let's be brutally honest, and I said this when we were selling Harry Kane, this is my big bugbear. Everyone says 100 million, we reinvest it. To what? To what did we reinvest 100 million from Harry Kane into? We got it wrong. Like we did when we sold Gareth Bale for big money. We got a lot of that transfer business wrong. The money shouldn't be a problem at Tottenham. That's why we have all these extra revenue sources. That's why we're one of the richest clubs in world football. We don't need that money. We don't need to sell our best player to kick on. And we've already had it twice where they've shown the ownership have shown the ability not to use them funds to kick on. You go back to Liverpool, they sold Coutinho. They used it and kicked on. We haven't shown that ability, and I'm not prepared to take another risk with it. Anyone that wants to sell Romero, you don't want to win trophies. It's that simple. And I said the same with Harry Kane. Anyone that wants to sell Harry Kane, don't sit there and preach to me that you want to win. Because where did that get you selling Harry Kane? Learn your lesson, and let's try and keep Romero at this fucking football club, please.
Anybody can bounce off of this. Just quickly, I just want someone to bounce off of this thought. Jason Bell saying far too often we have few players who are better than Levy's ambitions, and we want to get rid of them. And then Ian Ferguson saying we've given Romero absolutely zero reason to stay. Would hate it if he left, but 100% would not blame him. Johnny and Sam, isn't there a difference between wanting to leave and then also having high ambitions? And it feels like that's getting kind of, sort of confused here, where people think Romero's head is gone. He doesn't want to be at Spurs. But then others are saying, no, he just wants to win trophies and achieve the highest level and play at the highest level with the best players. Isn't there a difference there?
There's too much abuse. I mean, it's really been pissing me off. I got to be honest with you, because, understand the game. The guy's a winner, right? You crave for winners in football, and you get a winner and you slag him off because he's had a few bad games. Yeah, he's had a few bad games. I'm sure if you asked him, he would say the same thing. But he's 27 years of age. If we don't win the Europa League, that's our only hope.
Entering his prime.
Right? Because otherwise, he's going to be 29 years of age before he's got any hope of playing in the Champions League again, potentially. If we qualify for it next season, it'll be the season after. He's probably not interested in that. He's got the World Cup coming up. He should be playing at the best, right? And that's it. He should be playing at the highest level. And, playing 41 games or whatever we're going to be playing next season, because we're not going to have Europe if we don't win this tournament, is going to be a massive blow. It's going to be a massive blow all around, because the kids, the academy, aren't going to get any chance to come in, because there's going to be no games for them to play in, and their top players who with ambition won't want to be here because there's no hope of European football. This is a massive sliding door moment for Spurs. We have to, it's huge. It really is huge. Winning, I don't know how we're going to win it.
Surely the conversation should be, though, about signing players to help these guys achieve their ambitions at Tottenham. And
100%.
They want to win trophies, let them leave. They're not committed. Surely it's about, well, how do we make them committed? How do we make them stay? Sign players that they see bringing us on to that level, no?
Yeah, 100%. But he has seen, I'm not going to go into it, but he's asked about the ambition. He's asked, the club need to show ambition. These signings aren't ambition. This isn't ambition. Signing Gyökeres, signing Ederson, signing Mbeumo, signing quality players, right? That is showing ambition. These signings aren't showing. Yes, they've got potential. Yes, they're playing well. But this isn't who a top team would go and sign. A top team makes a statement signing. Unfortunately, we look like we're going to make a statement sale, That is not what we're about. But it's massive. I don't think people really realise what's at stake here, because there's a load of kids there in that academy who have struggled to get a bloody second of game time as it is. And if we don't make Europe, they're not going to see anything. And I'm worried that they're going to leave as well. So, winning the Europa League, and it is possible. It might seem impossible where we are right now, but we only got to win two games and draw two games to get to the final. And, should we make it, then we have every chance of turning this shit show around, because it's just not good enough. It's not good enough. We've got eat, sleep, repeat, where we've been making the same mistakes. As Dave said, we did it with Gareth Bale and pissed that money down the drain. We've done the same with the Harry Kane money. We've gone and spent, we got nearly 100 million for him, and we spent 47 million on Brennan Johnson. Give me a break. Come on, right? It ain't comparable. Right? Ambition, that doesn't smell of ambition. It smells of bullshit.
What do you make of my comment, Sam, that there's maybe, in my opinion, there's a confusion between a player just wanting to play at the highest level, the club that he's at, he wants them to have high ambitions as well. And then some people seem to confuse that, in my opinion, as him wanting to leave. Do you feel like you can see where I'm coming from with that? Like, Romero just wants to play at the highest level, wants to have the best players around him to, sort of go the furthest he can in his career. That's not necessarily an indication that he hates Spurs and that he wants to leave, right?
Yeah, look, I mean, I get why people are so defensive about anything negative when it comes to Spurs, because that's our team, right? You never want to hear anything negative about the club, but unfortunately, there are many negative things about the club, and Romero is not the first person who's ever said them, and he won't be the last. Let's be honest. Yeah, you're right. I do think people are conflating ambition with desire to leave. Harry Kane was the same thing. People were, as Dave said, I mean, even before that, people were hating on him when he had the chance to go to Man City, and there was that gentleman's agreement supposedly. He gave everything for the club, you know, even to a point where he had to, like Romero, he had to leave to seek medical advice elsewhere because he kept having recurring ankle injuries. I mean, there were so many seasons at the start where I feel like he missed like a month or 2 months of a season every season. Obviously, he was still smashing in the goals, but he said for years, you know, back the team, back the players, back the manager, and they didn't. And you'd think that your best ever player, or one of the best ever players, I'd say best ever player in the Premier League, who came through the academy, could have been a one club man, deciding to leave to go elsewhere. You'd think that would be a wake up call to the owners, but I don't know how many wake up calls they could have, how many alarms they set in the morning, and still oversleep. And you know, we've been sleeping for 20 odd years. As I've said before, I've seen Jack shit. No offense, Jack.
Does he play up front?
Say that again.
Does he play up front?
Jack shit, Jack Clark, Jack Nicky, any of them.
Yeah, look, it's just. I get it. I'm not, when I say, you know, I'm saying let Romero go if he really wants to go. I do get it. You know, he's a 26. He'll be 27 this year. And he deserves to be playing for a club that actually shows fight and willing to go out there and try and challenge for stuff. You know, we are the club that sacks managers before finals. We're the club that, you know, would prefer to buy, what was it, the Gareth Bale 7? You prefer to buy 7 players of average quality rather than go and buy 2 good ones. You know, there's so many examples over the years of ways that the club have let down the fans, the players, the manager. I genuinely feel sorry for all of us, you know, and that includes the players, it includes the coaches, because it seems like you come to Spurs and it's just a cesspit of, you know, players who have high potential that don't reach it, because there's a ceiling at Spurs, a self-imposed ceiling, and we all know who puts the ceiling there. But that's where we are, and as I said, I prefer to get rid of Romero. I say maybe get rid of is the wrong word, but I prefer to let him go. One, rather than see him waste his career, but also because he's not going to go out without a fight, and I don't think that will be positive for us going forward, especially with the shit show that we're in right now.
I think Romero is world class in my opinion, and that's just my opinion. Of course, there are very divisive opinions over Romero, but what Dave said earlier is where I stand on it, in that I think Daniel Levy, as well as maybe us as fans, have sort of taken for granted that we've had players like Sonny and Harry Kane who just really love the club, but also happen to be world-class players. But they've given Spurs a lot of patience and a lot of time to try to deliver trophies, to try to deliver good players around them, to push on for the highest of achievements. Whereas someone like Romero, I think he just wants the best for his own career, and he wants the best for his own sake. And he's not going to be like a Kane or a Sonny or someone that will give the club the benefit of the doubt. If he feels like, you know, that ambition is not being met or achieved, he will leave for that reason. And I think we just have forgotten that world-class players, you know, will do that. They will make that decision for their own career. And we've kind of, to a degree, taken advantage of the Sonnies and the Kanes of the world, who always just continued to come back to the club, even when they felt like there were those seeds of doubt of whether they were going to be, you know, reaching those ambitions. And I think Romero just is different because he's not technically, you know, a Spurs fan, you know, originally, like to a degree Sonny and Kane have been. But anybody have any final comments on that? Because I think we're going to wrap up with Jan Vertonghen, you know, some happy memories there.
Just to wrap up, you know, the whole Romero conversation, everyone's going on about the time he's been off the pitch. Have we ignored what he said about the medical department? It's not his fault. It's down to the medical department. He's literally said lately, you know, I've had an injury I could have come back sooner from. I've had to go out to Argentina to get the work done. You know, again, you know, you want to blame Romero for that, but you don't want to look into the medical department. I mean, you know, if you're going to pull him out for his injuries, then you've also got to acknowledge that the medical department's been in shit, and it ain't necessarily his fault.
And what about Mickey van der Ven? And what about
Richarlison.
Richarlison? I could go through them all, right? It's no coincidence, right? Richie said he'd had to thank outside help. He's had to thank outside help. And just that comment there about Newcastle keeping their players, okay? With respect, you know, they've got quality players. They're trying to get players in. We're not doing anything spectacular, and he's a World Cup winner. Can I just add, because I know you're gonna go on to that, just very quickly.
Go ahead.
I want to say big up to Mason Melia, who is coming to Spurs. Will be January next year because he can't come in the summer because he won't be 18 until after the transfer window closes in September. He was the record youngest goal scorer in the Irish League at 15 years and 281 days. And last night, the night before, I can't remember, I think it's last night, I can't remember now, he just broke Troy Parrott's record as the youngest player to score for Ireland. But don't confuse the two. They are
For
very...
the under-21s, not the full national team.
Sorry, the under-21s, but still... you know, the youngest to score.
Yeah,
he's definitely something about him. I'm telling you. And
you know what, Johnny? Many people are surprised it's taken this long to get into the under-21 setup. To be quite frank with you, you know, they reckon he should have been in there sooner and possibly broke it sooner. Mason Melia.
Yeah. So just as a big thing, and as just quickly move because we'll move on. Troy Parrott, for whatever you say about him,
he's been brilliant for
in that game. Let me tell you something. In that game against us, right, he gave us non-stop trouble. He scored 17 goals this season.
Turning a corner.
You know, could we really not have done with him? Ange Postecoglou decided he didn't want him. I think he would have been a better squad player than Dane Scarlett, but I'm not the manager.
Do you know what? He's played well for the last two games up front for the Republic of Ireland very well as well. He is a player that is sort of coming into his own now a little bit to a large degree. But look, I think we sort of want to end off because I know, you know, we all want to go and get dinner and all that sort of jazz. That, you know, we go around and get everyone's sort of maybe favorite Jan Vertonghen moment. You know, it's come out today that he's retiring now at the end of this season. You know, everyone loves them times that we had under Pochettino and stuff like that. So we'll go around and get everyone's quick favorite memory of Jan Vertonghen. I think Johnny sort of sums it up, right? Super Jan. What a celebration.
Jan. I was there. And like, wow, what a great moment. I remember posting it, actually. I'm trying to remember what year that was now.
Gave me a hard
2013.
2015?
2013.
Really, as long ago as that? My God, it seems like a lifetime ago.
I remember because...
Was it Wembley? Hang on. Was it Wembley? No.
Oh, I'm thinking of the United one where he scored against United and ripped his.
No, I'm talking about. I don't.
He did that when he scored his first goal against United. But you're talking. Are you talking about the Dortmund game?
Yeah.
That
yeah, that was. I think it was the Dortmund goal. That was the game that seemed to mean more to me. I'm sure it was at Wembley.
That Dortmund game, it would have been at Wembley that year.
Yeah, I was there for that as well.
Yeah, it would have been. Yeah. Do you know what? That's my favorite memory is the you know, two that you brought up there. That Dortmund performance at left back was absolutely unbelievable.
Amazing.
And then, you know, the celebration, you know, I was doing that for weeks, you know, opening up my jacket to people, just doing that. They're like, what are you doing? I'm like, Super Dave. You know, absolutely love it. Brilliant.
Is he the best left-sided center back that Spurs have had in the Premier League era? Would you say?
I
left-footed center back.
Disagree.
In the Premier League era, yeah. Listen, he's up with the greats. You know, he's up the greats. You know, Jan and Toby were just when you think about the fact they conceded, was it 7 or 8 goals in a whole season?
What was it 2017? Was it the best defensive?
And then here we are, like hoping we only concede.
Yeah.
We just do that in 2-3 games.
You know, I actually took for granted back then how solid they were. Do you know what I mean?
And he was only bought for. He was also a classic Levy deal, where wasn't he only bought for like £10 million or like something like that?
Yeah, he's
as well?
bought straight in from Ajax, wasn't he?
Yeah, it's like a classic diamond of the rough, or whatever you want to call it. The Spurs have done for a long time now. You know, guys that we bring in for no money that end up just being, you know, the best we've seen in a long, long time.
Ghosty's comments there was absolutely spot on, right? Okay. Now, when you play on your Sunday league football, imagine this, roll it out, right? You play Sunday league, two of your mates, two of the guys haven't turned up because they're pissed, and they bring in two others, right? And you're playing on the pitch. Oh my God, they're absolute shit. They're not good enough. And they're a letdown, right? It's no different when you're playing pro football, right? And you're in that team, and you can see players that are in that team who you believe aren't good enough. And that is where Christian Romero lies, I believe, when he's looking at that team and he's passing the ball and he's trying to get and like seeing the quality that's in front of him.
Absolutely. But you know what? Absolutely spot on. Definitely agree with that. You know, and even if those who don't play football, if you play pro clubs, same situation sort of applies. So, you know, you could put it into that context. And Alpesh Patel, just quickly, I mean,
good to see
the Tottenham Legends game, man, honestly, you know, brought a tear to my eye, you know, seeing how Robbie Keane back out there, the hat-trick, Lennon, Berbatov, honestly, you know, absolutely unbelievable.
The Berbatov touch,
nostalgia.
That Berbatov touch was so magical. It reminded me the first time
Berbatov played, you know, throwback.
Yeah. I mean, listen, I remember the first time I saw Berbatov, very quickly, Paul Robinson kicked the ball out, was in the West Stand, the ball completely disappeared. I couldn't see it was that high. And Berbatov, the ball came out of the sky, Berbatov killed the ball with one touch, put his leg out, killed the ball, and the whole area around me was stood up and applaud and go, whoa. Yeah, you know, you saw a bit of that on Sunday there.
Just honestly brought back memories, everything else. You know, some of my favorite players from my favorite era, my man. Big up Alpesh, you know, I'm delighted you got to go on that. Big up Alpesh. Really appreciate it. But look, we'll let Johnny and we'll let Sam go and enjoy the rest of their evenings. I want to say a massive thank you to you guys. We'll let you plug what you need to plug.
Johnny, putting in your Twitter. I'm also, by the way, on Johnny's Twitter. You can find his Instagram. You can also follow him over to Football Link as well. I'm going to put the link in for that. But, you know, I think just his Twitter is a good place to go to be able to find all the things that Johnny is doing. But start with you first, sir. Appreciate you once again, you know, making this show possible.
Thank you, and thanks, guys, for having me on, and thanks for everyone in the on the show listening to me. Because sometimes I can get a bit passionate or go on a bit or repeat myself, which is what happens when you come on the show and you got nothing. Those Spurs for 18 days. If you're on, you'll be thankful of that. This is the rest period before the drama that lies ahead. If you're on TikTok or on Instagram, please give me a follow. It's Talking Tottenham 1882. I'm trying to build my TikTok back up again after losing both accounts in January. But guys, thanks very much. Always a pleasure to stream with you, and Sam and Jack and you, Dave, as always. And look forward to seeing you guys soon.
Thank you very much, Johnny. I really appreciate your time. Really enjoy your input as always, you know. So I'm glad that you can keep making up time to come over here and have conversations with us. And I'll be over there for the Palace game. So hopefully, you know, you haven't
we'll hook up
the games by then, and I'll get to meet up with you, you know, beforehand for a while and have a chat and that. So big up, really appreciate that, Johnny. And I know the Irish Hotspur community do as well. So really appreciate that. And Sam.
Yeah. Any updates on the 5Ks for the people, Sam, or you know, what do you have to plug? Plug your Strava.
My calf's a bit tight at the moment, so I might have to have a bath after dinner and just soak it up a little bit. Because I'm supposed to be going again tomorrow, so it's we'll have to see how that goes. There was a good commenter in the chat. I've now had in the previous show, I've had someone say I look like a Bond villain who turns out to be the good guy. And someone in this one has put that my beard and my eyebrows make me look like Satan.
Jesus, that's a bit.
which is why I put that comment in about Judas used to be an angel. So I mean, yeah, I'm clearly an interesting character for the fans in the chat, and I appreciate all the comments. I appreciate the continued support of the boys, always having me on. I always appreciate that. You know, even when we disagree about certain things, you know, that's the beauty of the channel, right? You know, we
honestly, it'd be worse if we were sitting here licking each other's hole and agreeing all the time. You know, I have no problem with the different views and opinions. At the end of the day, I've made no bones about it. That's what I set the channel up for. Let go and speak to Spurs fans, and let's speak to each other. So, and look, I want to say a massive thank you to you, Swat. You're always available. You're always texting us early. You're sort of driving force behind it, making sure we're ready to go on off for every Tuesday. So I appreciate it, my man.
Yeah, no problem. And yeah, if you want to head over to my Spurs, a bit of sarcasm, a bit of sadness, a bit of thinking of nostalgia, and sometimes I talk about football. So yeah, follow me over there. Otherwise, it's been a pleasure, boys.
No, I appreciate it, Sam. Thank you very much, my man. Really appreciate your time this evening. And we'll speak again soon, lad. I'll be on Pro Clubs tomorrow evening, so I'll play. Will you be on?
I will. I'll make a special effort, Dave.
Yeah, nice one. Well, I'll try. I know you have work the next day, so not to leave it too late. But we'll sort it out anyway, my man. Right, Sam. See you later. We'll appreciate your time.
Yeah. You're welcome to stick around, Sam, if you want. But we're going to take the members' comments. At the end of the show here. Also plug some other things. So you're welcome to stay with us, or you can grab your dinner at any point. Tomorrow, by the way, just a quick announcement, guys. We're doing a hybrid fan show for at least an hour tomorrow over on Big Up. Free for everyone to join. Just going to have, like I said, a roundtable type discussion. So if you've been kind of eager to come on, have a chat with Dave Ride, talk about Jed Spence, talk about the Romero news, plenty of stuff, that's come out maybe just recently. Join us tomorrow for that. I think it's going to be same time the fan show normally would be, which would be 7 p.m. So join us over there, please. And you'd be helping out the channel a ton, but also in case maybe you wanted to do a fan show before, just haven't done, this would be a good little taster of it. So please follow us over there. And then, like I said, regular fan show duties, all that sort of stuff will be out on Monday the following week. And then the link is also pinned at the top of the chat as well for everybody. But let's get into some of the members' comments. By the way, if you are a member, we've reserved time at the end of the show to answer some of your guys' questions. As always, Artist T likes to ask us plenty of them, so we're going to have to get through these. Dave, I'll throw some at you. Here's something to think about. He says, we never win at Stamford Bridge, so say we get embarrassed by Chelsea. Don't like to think about that already. Be it a 6-0 Everton style or a 3-1, basically just an embarrassing loss, then we don't get a result against Southampton. Either a draw or loss, even if we are still in Europe. Do you think Levy will stick with Ange, or will he be pushed into sacking him right after? Specifically, if these two games are another worst performance of the season, quote unquote, and is another embarrassment. Dave, I think you and I have made our comments kind of clear on this. I don't think Daniel Levy is going to, sack Ange. I think he's going to give him every chance he can until the end of the season, really. But what if they're, let's say, we're 6-0 type of loss, to a Chelsea, or a really bad loss after that to another Premier League team? Could Daniel Levy cut it sooner than we might expect?
Look, I've always sort of said I think as long as Ange Postecoglou remains in Europe, he'll be here. Yeah. I think, once we're out of Europe is where the decision really needs to be made. And, if Paratici does end up joining AC Milan, I did see a report a while ago suggesting that, he was going to continue with Johan Lang, and it was him and Johan Lang that wanted Ange, or was him, that wanted to go down the Daniel Levy that wanted to go down the Ange Postecoglou route, whereas Paratici wanted to go down, what's that guy at PSG right now, Jack? What's his name?
Sorry, I was looking at the comments. The manager?
That PSG, yeah.
Luis Enrique.
Yeah, it was apparently Paratici wanted Luis Enrique, so maybe that tells us that Paratici won't be coming back to the club, and that Daniel Levy, he's going to back Ange Postecoglou. It's the guy that he put in charge. He brought in Johan Lang to sort of try and do the transfer business for him. But so it'd be interesting to see. Maybe he does survive to the end of the season. Maybe Postecoglou does, or maybe Levy does let him go into next season. But for me, I just don't think there's any decision to be made until we know our fate in Europe.
And he says, for all the panel members, what are your short list of players that need to be sold this summer, even if they have some years left on their contract? I can take some of these. I would look to potentially move on Brennan Johnson, if we can, or just don't really see the point of, continuing to defend him when all he does is pretty much benefit from the creativity, provided by others for him. Maybe some people would give him another season, but I've already seen enough. I would also look to, sadly, sell on Richarlison. As much as I have a lot of sympathy for maybe the injury troubles that he's had, I do think we need to move him on as well. And then I would look to sell Basuma. I'd look to sell, I think, another maybe winger, up front, Timo Werner, some others in there that I just don't think have been doing the business really. But Dave, any quick players that maybe you would have sold or would sell this summer?
No, I think you've hit the nail on the head. I think, Reguilon will be gone, Forrester will be gone, Whiteman will be gone, Richarlison potentially be sold, and Basuma. I think them five are definitely on the chopping block for sure.
Yeah. And then do you think it's fair to say Spence wouldn't have played if it weren't for injuries, question mark, this season? So would we have seen what Jed Spence is capable of had it not been for Pedro Porro and or more in the case of Destiny Udogie, right, being injured?
No, look, I think you always would have seen Jed Spence at some point. I think, he done his job in preseason. He was too good to ignore. And I think, the end of the day, you're never ever gonna we gotta put this into our head. We're never ever gonna get through a season without injuries. It doesn't exist. It's not a thing that exists. You're always going to get injuries, and that's why you've got the importance of building a squad. So I think, always, with the amount of games we were due to play this year, Jed Spence would have got some game time at least. It's all about how you take it, and I think Jed Spence has taken it, and that's why he's staying in the team.
Do you fear for our youth players' futures?
Yep.
Some of them, yes, like Mikey Moore, I'd say. I think the guy is
The ones that have come
exceptionally
through the
talented.
academy, Jack. They're the ones I fear for. We never give them opportunities.
Yeah, so I'd say Mikey Moore I do fear for because I think he was promised probably more playing time than he's actually been given this season. But then I'd also look at Jamie Donnelly, who I think has benefited from, his time, on a loan. But if he's not given more opportunities in the Spurs first team, I think this next season, I'd fear for, maybe I think Jamie Donnelly would try to give Spurs a lot of chances to get him into the team. But again, like these guys, I think have a really, really high ceiling and they need, to be given that validation by the club that they do have plans for them. And they do have a pathway for them. And when you're bringing in other young players like a Matisse Tell or whatnot, I wonder what sort of message that does send to them. So I do actually fear for a lot of our younger players or our youth academy players' futures. And even to this season, like, I'm not sure if he needed, to be given tons of minutes in the first team, but Tyrese Hall, right? There was a lot of praise and a lot of sort of hype around that guy, in the youth academy, and they've not found any loan move for him or any sort of type of move away from the club for him to be able to play at a higher level as well. And even some of the goalkeepers like Josh Keeley, who I think is very, very talented, will he ever be given that chance to, crack into the first team, with the new signing of Kinski? So what I'm a little frustrated by is we kind of just have blocked the pathway by signing other young players, instead of buying experienced players. I think experienced players don't necessarily block the pathway, but I think if you sign a plethora of young players, I don't know what that, I think the message that you're sending to the youth academy isn't great, to be honest.
100%. And, it's been evident this season, the players that have come through the under 21s, one at under 17, under 18, and under 21 level by the time they were 18, 19 years of age, by the way. You're not talking about 20, 21-year-olds. You're talking about a group of young lads. And everyone that we've bought in has been given a shot ahead of them. Prime example, Jamie Donnelly at preseason, thrown out to left back while Bergvall comes in and plays where, we paid money for. So I definitely feel for them. And if that's the case, when you don't have Europe next year, you don't have 60-odd games to play in the season, which reduces the amount of minutes you're going to give them and that they can get across the season because you're not as stretched and stuff like that. So it definitely will have a knock-on effect. RST also says, do you think conflating booing of the team and slamming them with being a bad fan, we see the notion of you need to get behind the team and don't criticize the team because it doesn't help. And I always use examples of it. Southampton and Leicester, should their fans applaud their players and they're losing every week. Look, first of all, I'm never ever going to sit here and tell people how they should support the team. Pay more than enough money. You've been around long enough supporting Tottenham Hotspur to make your own decision on how you want to report it. But at the end of the or support it. But at the end of the day, I do believe you can support the team and still have concerns of what's going on. I think that's what gets conflated. You can still be unhappy with what's going on and still be there and support the team every single match day and stuff like that. So that's all I have to say on the matter, to be honest with you, Artist T, on that one. We'll keep it moving. What are the odds the player's backhand as a person, but in terms of his tactics, they are divided? Say Maddison is likely someone that hates handball. Edit, I heard Jed's comments about this, lol. Do you think he's telling the truth about backing Andrew? Is he just picking his words wisely? What I will say, Artist T, is, these players don't have to come out and say what they're saying. They don't have to go that extra mile. They don't have to do it. In fact, saying nothing at all or not praising them, but not critiquing them actually says more about what they feel about the manager. The fact that they seem to come out and go the extra mile, I think they're trying to tell us, look, I get the fans' opinion, but inside, we're still with him. I think that's what they're trying to get across, to be quite frank.
And then what are the dinner plans, Dave?
Yeah, so I'm just having some turkey and some spuds tonight with a couple of vegetables. Saying, Jack knows the last while I've been in the gym doing 5K on the treadmill, most days, and, just trying to get healthy and stuff like that. Johnny gave me a compliment on the complexion of my skin when he first came in, which means it must be working. So, yeah, that's basically it, my man.
I might have some sushi later or something a bit kind of lighter in sort of, it's going to be actually weirdly a very hot day in Seattle. So I'm going to actually have something that isn't, too, sort of steamy or hot or anything. I might have like maybe a bit of, something like kind of refreshing, if you will. So something like sushi, maybe even I love a good ceviche, but sometimes it's kind of hard to find, this time of year. So something like that. MV Joker Davis, not Spurs related, but Poch's thoughts on Poch's start at U.S. men's national team. Dave is, kind of getting on me to start doing a little bit better about, keeping updated on the U.S. men's national team, Eddie. But so far, you could say, it hasn't gone as swimmingly as you would have expected for Pochettino. What I will say is, remember his time at Chelsea, right? It didn't start off actually that brilliantly, but then towards the end of that season, his team was looking like one of at least the top 5, top 4 best teams, in the Premier League. And then for some reason, they ended up sacking him, over at Chelsea. And I think, have they really benefited from that? Enzo Maresca is sort of having, I think, a kind of a bit of a weird time there as well, despite getting a lot of extra investment and whatnot. So I trust Pochettino to do well with the men's national team. I'm not the biggest expert on it. I'm actually going to start asking people like Tyler and other sort of, better experts than me on this sort of thing, what their opinions might be. But with Pochettino, I trust him at the end of the day. I trust him to get things right. And he is going to be a better manager, in my opinion, than that guy Berhalter who they had before. I just don't think that guy is really the one that you can have in charge if you really want to be a serious national team, especially as the host nation or one of the host nations for the tournament. Mr. Robot Head, Jason Bell saying, am I the only one starting to enjoy international breaks because I get a break away from Spurs? Dave and I get an opportunity to sort of look under the hood, make some, tweaks and improvements to the channel. I think that's what we like. It's a little bit of a change of pace, a change of the schedule. At the end of the day, man, like as much as we try to be as honest as we can about Spurs, when they're doing good, when they're doing poorly, like I do like to see us playing. I do get pretty. I miss sort of seeing Spurs play. Quite quickly. It's just maybe this season, yes, like it's been nice to have a few days, away from the constant sort of kind of work of getting ready for each and every single game, content wise. But in terms of actually just being a Spurs fan, like myself and like Dave, I mean, I don't want to speak for Dave, but what, it doesn't, I don't know, like I do miss us playing, and I do miss just being able to watch the football. I don't really watch a lot of international sort of fixtures or anything like that. I just sort of use it as a break from football in general, but pretty quickly I start to miss it.
Oh, yeah, well, look, we actually, we use the international break to go and get our shit done, maybe things that we put off for a while and stuff like that. But do you know what? Now that Ireland are back winning games of football, my man, I'm actually enjoying the international break this time around, actually, to be quite frank with you, Mr. Robot Head. But before that, I would have exactly felt like you and Jack, to be quite frank. Big up, my man. And then I believe we've got this from Trinidad. Says, if there was no restrictions on managerial appointments, who would now be the ideal candidate for each member of the panel to get Spurs to where we truly want to be, respect to the flat cap? Look, Trinidad, I've made no secret of mine. I'm going to be quick. Look, I'm of the opinion, it doesn't really, like, we can sit here and people can go, Iriola, I don't know, what's that guy's name at Fulham? Silva.
Marcus Silva.
They can go Thomas Frank. They can pick a manager across Europe. The reality is, the question needs to be, why is Conte, Jose, Nuno, and Ange all failed to stamp their style on the football club and on the team where they haven't at other clubs? They've managed to be stamping at other clubs. So the reality is, we can sit here and list off all the benefits of Iriola. You think he's going to produce that at Tottenham Hotspur? And I've said this time and time again. We can keep blaming the manager for absolutely everything, but we need to get stuff inside the club right, or actually just recruit properly underneath them so that they can, bring their style of football to this football club. So for me, where I'm at right now, to be honest with you, bring them in. The first season we'll probably get a bounce. We won't have Europe. We'll be the benefit of that. We'll get a bounce, finish high enough. The second season, it'll all go tits up yet again. So to be honest with you, I'm not getting hyped up around managers coming here anymore. Like I've said, I'll always give a manager a fair chance. always give them time. I actually don't blame them for a lot of what goes on. I think, the club is in a bad enough place to not make them succeed. That's my opinion. So I'm not really going to get too hyped up or sit here listing pros. People. The one I do find a bit hypocritical, though, is the Iraola one. People say with Ange, we want a guy that can see out leads. Iraola dropped the 2-0 lead against a Tottenham team that none of the fan base rates. He didn't do anything to see it out differently. Pressing from the front, everything else. Well, Iraola done that against us. You know what I mean? That's the one I find a little bit hypocritical. This too gung-ho, this ain't working, go and get Iraola. It's like more or less the exact same sort of style to a certain degree.
Yeah. I'll say that I was actually really satisfied with the original list that actually Spurs had, when we hired Postecoglou from that list. But, you think of the names that were on there: Nagelsmann, Enrique, Arne Slot, Pochettino. I think Thomas Tuchel, maybe to a degree now, maybe doesn't look as good, but I think there were a lot of really, really good managers on that original sort of short list that we might have had when we did end up hiring Postecoglou, and to a degree, when Postecoglou first came here, I still was pretty happy with that one. I thought that was, maybe a step in the right direction for what Spurs fans, were saying that they wanted, which was attack-minded football, something that was very different from the ones in Antonio Conte and Jose Mourinho. But even in the past, I was really elated with the Jose signing and the Antonio Conte signing. I'm a defensive-minded person myself, so I'm actually been most of the time I've been pretty happy with the short list of managers that Spurs are linked with. It's just that, in my opinion, as Dave and I have ranted for a long time now, I just don't think they've been given the backing, to succeed in the way that I think that they could have. So thank you guys, all the members that have sent in those comments. In case, again, you guys don't know that, it is a perk and it is a benefit of being a member of this channel. We do reserve time at the end of these shows to answer your questions. And there's been a lot of really, really generous support and really, really generous words from a lot of you guys. Kaylee Davis upgrading to an elite membership. Hopefully we can link up sometime soon, Kaylee. The 2 Marks as well, celebrating 15 months. Hennessy for the kind words on 17K as well. Thank you, Hennessy. THFC Till I Die. Dermatron, 37 months, approaching 40 at this point. Very, very generous, sir. Rob Wallace gifting out 10 memberships. So thank you, Rob. And please, everybody, take advantage of it. Come on Monday, take advantage of his generosity. We'll be back to normal business and more of a normal schedule come next week. And then also Ryan Trestaine as well. And actually, sorry, we might have skipped over this question from Ryan saying, what are the chances we keep Ange at the end of the season? This is for everyone. I think it's very dependent on how well he does in the Europa League, Ryan. I think we've more or less said that, a few times now at this point. It's really dependent on how well he does in the Europa League. If he can get as far as a final, I wonder if, maybe the Spurs board and the Spurs hierarchy might sort of think about him a bit differently.
He gets to a final, he'll keep his job.
Yeah. I think if he ends up crashing out before that, especially in an ugly manner, let's say, where it's not like, a bad deflection or like something that, if we just get truly beaten by, let's say, Frankfurt or maybe a team after that, then I think they might, cut the strings with Postecoglou. But I think Dave and I have more or less, been pretty consistent about that, for the most part. So very, very appreciative of you, Ryan. And then Ian Ferguson, thank you on 3 years as well, up there with Dermatron, my man. Like I said, 3 years is just crazy. It's like become a long-term relationship with you guys. Thank you guys so much for the love and the support. And with everything going on Spurs wise, and international break and everything like that, it's a good chance for plenty of us to take our minds off of Spurs, but you guys continue to watch us and support us. We're very, very, very thankful. And Ian, I hope you're doing okay, my man. I hope you're doing all right and enjoying your week. I'm about to enjoy the sunshine. Actually, it's going to be a very, very hot, warm day. Going to do some stuff behind the scenes for the channel, but looking forward to, the rest of this little international break. So thank you guys. Very, very appreciative.
Big up, Ian. You know what? Probably longer than most of us, probably longest relationship most of us has had. I really appreciate that. But guys, that's it from us. Hopefully you really enjoyed, the conversation today. And look, we have our own thoughts, separate video coming out that we recorded earlier on, our feelings on the Jed Spence interview. It probably is a lot more positive than maybe what Johnny and Sam probably seen it. So, have a listen and have your say on that in the comment section below. And it is important to start getting your comments in underneath these videos. It doesn't matter whether it's good, bad, whether you hate me and Jack or love us. It doesn't really matter, because we are going to start, reacting to people's comments and stuff. Sometimes rather than just get in and reply underneath, we're just going to bring them up on screen and start having a say. We're going to start introducing things like that. So make sure you start getting your comments in underneath, and we'll have conversations on that. But guys, tomorrow over on Big Up, we'll have it all posted in the community section for everybody to see. An hour and a half. Come on, have your say. Anyone's welcome. You don't need any memberships, anything like that. Anyone's welcome. Come on and have your say. Chat to myself and Jack about whatever it is. Life, Tottenham, it doesn't matter. Come and have a chat. Preferably Tottenham. That would be nice. But guys, we'll see you tomorrow. As always, come on, you Spurs.
Come on, you Spurs. Thank you guys as always. And there's the link one last time so you guys don't miss it for tomorrow. And we'll see you all tomorrow for that fan show.